Welcome back to Faith Roots and to our What Matters series, looking at 1 and 2 Chronicles. Today we're going to be looking at 1 Chronicles chapter 11 and chapter 12. You might want to find that in a Bible and read it through. You might want to pause the talk before going on. But I've entitled today's talk, The Credits. You watch a TV program, particularly American TV programs, as well as the long credits at the end, that list pretty much everybody and everything. You've got the opening credits. Will include who the producer and the editor is. They come up after a little bit of story. In the States, there'd be an advert break as well. And then you have the credits with the opening theme music and some previous action shots of the characters in role. And really what you're doing is you are introducing who the key people are so that you can be looking out for them. And there's a bit of that kind of feel to 1 Chronicles 11 and 12. We've had the opening scenes in the story, and particularly the scene that shows us the sad demise of King Saul. We're about to get this new king, King David, and that's where the story is going to focus in. And we are asking lots of questions now about what will make David different from Saul. What is going to make him a good king? Why will his reign be different? And there will be some clues in these opening credits as we begin to get acquainted with the characters, the people around him. And so we begin those credits with David himself as he kind of takes centre stage. Have a look at verse 1 to 4 with me. 1 to 3 with me, rather. So in chapter 11, verse 1 to 3, we begin to see people coming to David. David is anointed as king at Hebron. After the Philistines have been defeated, the people have scattered, but they now start to gather again, and they gather to come and find David. They speak to him, they ask him to be their king, they confirm their allegiance to him. And you'll notice a few things. First of all, notice that description of David and them as being flesh and blood, or literally bone and flesh. We are your own bone and flesh. And the language there is a close mirror of Genesis 2, when God has made Eve as a helper for Adam, like him, but opposite to him, to complement him. Adam sings this song of delight and joy, and in it he says, "You are bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh." And for that reason, he becomes one flesh with her. She is right for him, because yes, there's a distinction. He is female, he is male. But there is also a unity, a oneness. She has come from him. God has made her out of a bone, a rib from Adam's side. David is going to be a suitable leader and helper of Israel and defender of Israel, because there is a distinction of role, but there's also this incredible likeness. He is one of the people. He is their kinsman. Bone and flesh. He is a fellow descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. David will be, in that respect, different, set apart. He's the anointed king. But he is also equal with the people under God, that the kings were not meant to take up the throne in order to lord it over the people or to acquire power and riches. With the people, they were meant to be subservient to God, under God's law. Nobody in Israel was above the law. So that's very different to the kingdoms of the world around. So here is David, and he is recognized by them as their king because he is like them, even as he is distinct from them. He's recognized as their king because they look and they say, you are already doing it. Did you notice that as you read it? Verse 2, in the past, even when Saul was king, you were the one who really led the forces of Israel, and the Lord your God told you, you will be the shepherd of my people, Israel. You will be the leader of my people, Israel. So they are recognizing that David has already been doing this. He's already been leading the people. He's already been the one that has been the first in the battle to fight for them. He's already been the one providing for them. He's already been the one defending and protecting them. And there's wise advice. There's a few bits of wise advice here for churches looking to appoint elders, to appoint leaders in the church. First bit of advice is this. That if you want to appoint somebody as an elder, as a leader in the church, then look for people who are already doing it. You don't want the congregation to be responding when you suggest a leader by saying, that's a surprise, I guess we could give it a go. You want them to be responding more along the lines of, that is so obvious, they already seem to be doing it. We thought they already were a leader. We already thought they were an elder or a deacon or the other leadership positions that you might have. The other thing to notice is this, that it's not the people who choose David. It's not David who pushes himself forward. It's God that appoints. It's God that anoints. It's God that calls. And so they are responding to what God has already said, what God has already promised. God told you, you will be the shepherd of the people. And so our job is not to choose, not to elect, not to recruit who we think should be leading the church. Our job is to discern what God is saying and to listen to him. So David is recognized because he's already doing the job, but more importantly, because God has singled him out. God has called him. And he's called him specifically to be a shepherd king. That imagery of provision and guidance and protection. David is anointed as king, verse 1 to 3. Then verse 4 to 10, David takes Jerusalem as his capital city. The start, he rules in Hebron. In fact, the chronicler compresses things in. There's actually a period of tension, a bit of civil war. Not all of Saul's followers recognize him as king immediately, but gradually he wins them over. He wins battles, but he also draws people that come over to himself, over to him. And that takes time. And so he rules in Hebron for 7 years, according to 2 Samuel 5, verse 5. And meanwhile, Jerusalem, the city that he wants to establish as his stronghold, as his capital city, the city where his palace will be and where the temple will be, remains in the hands of the Jebusites. They're one of the tribes that were described as the 7 tribes, the 7 nations that inhabit the land that were stronger than the people of Israel, but God had promised to overthrow them. However, the Israelites had failed to drive these people completely out of the land. They managed to get themselves embedded in. You can read about that in Joshua 15, verse 63, and also in Judges 1, verse 21. But now David is about to complete what people before him have failed to do. And so he goes up to take over Jerusalem. Notice Joab comes to prominence here. Joab will be one of the commanders of the army but he acts heroically on David's behalf. This as well. Hebron is in Judah. David is from the tribe of Judah. So it works as a regional capital. If David is going to be a divisive king, if he's going to primarily be a Judean ruler, then Hebron works fine. But that would leave question marks about whether or not he is really in charge of the whole kingdom, whether he is for the whole kingdom, and whether the whole people of Israel are for him. Jerusalem is in Benjamin. I remember that Saul had been from the tribe of Benjamin, so taking Jerusalem and making it his capital city would be a crucial symbol for David. It would show that he had united the kingdom and that he really had replaced Saul's dynasty. And then being introduced to David, being introduced to his capital city, where he's going to rule, a little bit of how he's going to rule. He's going to rule for the whole people. We are then told about some of the people that had come to David, that had united around him, that had gathered around him, that were recognizing him as king. And in fact, these are people that had already gone over to David when he was on the run from Saul. So have a look at chapter 11, verse 10 to 47. And there you discover some of the followers of David. They will become his inner circle, his bodyguard, his elite forces. And there's a particular focus on one small group of people, often referred to as the free, and another slightly larger but still very small elite troop, the 40. These are the people that David can depend upon. These are the men of valor, if you like. They're the equivalent of his knights of the round table or of the household cavalry, with a little bit of a mix of the SAS to put sort of contemporary military comparisons in place. What about the free in chapter 11, verse 10 to 14? We're told, and they're ones that have decided to make David king. And so they're listed. There's Jashobeam. He's the leader of the free, verse 11. And he's described as the mightiest of David's warriors. He once used his spear to kill 300 in one battle. Then next to him is Eleazar, the son of Dodai. He's with David, verse 12, when the Philistines attack and the Israelites are in a field full of barley, and the army flee. David and Eleazar together stand their ground. They don't flee. Eleazar is committed to the cause, committed to defending Israel, committed to defending David. He is loyal and faithful, and this is the kind of person that David is drawing to himself. Told a little bit more about the free in verse 15. Once when David was at the rock near the cave of Adullam, the Philistine army was camped in the valley of Rephaim. The free, who were among the 30, an elite group among David's fighting men, went down to meet him there. David was staying in the stronghold at the time, and a Philistine detachment had occupied the town of Bethlehem. David remarked longingly to his men, "Oh, how I would love some of that good water from the well by the gate in Bethlehem." So the free broke through the Philistine lines, drew some water from the well by the gate in Bethlehem, and brought it back to David. But David refused to drink it. Instead, he poured it out as an offering to the Lord. "God forbid that I should drink this," he exclaimed. "This water is as precious as the blood of these men who risked their lives to bring it to me." So David did not drink it. These are examples of the exploits of the free. Now you notice that we are beginning to get a sense of these men, of their strength, of their bravery, their courage. Those are the kinds of people David wants around him, people with courage and loyalty. And it's the kind of loyalty and faithfulness that a man like David produces, that a good, healthy, godly leader produces. That little bit there is fascinating, isn't it, though? That bit about David going, "Oh, I'm thirsty, and I really wish I could drink from the well in my hometown. That water is special to me." And the free overhearing it and saying, "We're going to meet his request," and off they go. And they break into the town and they get water and they bring it back. What an amazing feat. David, instead of drinking it, he pours it out on the ground. You were one of the three, or if you were someone watching in, you might be tempted to think, well, that was a bit of a waste. What did we go to all that effort for? Doesn't he care about our bravery? But in fact, David is demonstrating here that he does respect their bravery and their courage. He's saying, this is so precious, and actually their blood is more important. Their life is more important to me, even than the drink that I wanted. And actually, I'm not in the habit of putting people at risk. I didn't expect that. It was a wish. But I didn't expect them to go to that effort for me. But I appreciate it so much. This is so costly. Then actually the only person worth pouring out your life like that for is God. That's the only person that you should owe that level of devotion to. And that's why David pours out the drink as an offering, as a form of sacrifice, recognizing its cost, but saying that ultimately this kind of devotion belongs to the Lord alone. Again, we're getting that sense of David and him being different to Saul. Saul is the one who, when he's told these things are to be devoted to the Lord, takes them for himself. David is the one who, when something is brought and he's told, you can have this, says, no, I am devoting it to the Lord. Then over the page, in chapter 12, verse 1 to 22, we see this growing army of people that are gathering to David. And this includes people that had previously been with Saul. And even when Saul is still king, when David is hiding, people are sensing the direction of travel and they are coming over to him. Remember that even as the power balance is shifting, David still continues to respect Saul. He will not go against Saul and try to overthrow him by force. He will wait until it's God's time. Then in chapter 12, verse 23 to 40, we see God's people, the Israelites, and they've come to David acting with intent. Men came in battle array to Hebron, not to fight against David, but to show that they're ready to fight with him. They are ready as his warriors, with the single purpose of making David the king over all Israel. In fact, everyone in Israel agreed that David should be their king. They feasted and drank with David for 3 days, for preparations had been made by their relatives for their arrival. And people from as far away as Issachar, Zebulun, and Naphtali brought food on donkeys, camels, mules, and oxen. Vast supplies of flour, fig cakes, clusters of raisins, wine, olive oil, cattle, sheep, and goats were brought to the celebration. There was great joy throughout Israel. David is anointed as king. The people come and recognize him, and they feast and they celebrate, because now the kingdom is David's. And it is a good thing for them. David is going to be a good and righteous king over them. So some lessons for us, practical lessons about leadership. What does a good leader look like? Somebody that is already doing it. Somebody who will provide and protect, will be a shepherd. Somebody who first, foremost, and primarily is called by God, so that we recognize God's calling. Somebody who draws and attracts devotion and loyalty, but ensures that that loyalty is refocused on the Lord. So some practical lessons for us there. There is the important job that the chronicler is doing here of explaining why David is the true king of Israel, why the kingdom had to shift, how this is God's purpose. Because this is Old Testament scripture, it is pointing forward to Christ. Christ is the one, the only one who can draw all people to himself. If I am lifted up, I will draw all people to myself, just as David at Hebron draws the people to himself. Jesus draws people from every tribe and tongue, every nation to himself. Jesus, the one who will make his capital city the New Jerusalem, which actually is the church. Jesus, the one, the only one who can attract that kind of loyalty and affection. Jesus, whose own life was poured out as an offering to God, his blood shed for us. Jesus, the one who is distinct from us and yet came to be bone and flesh with us. None of us fully God, but fully human. And so as we look at 1 Corinthians 11 and 12, we learn some practical lessons. But most of all, we are reminded again that devotion that David showed in pouring out that offering, the devotion that those three men had for David, is the kind of devotion itself should draw out of us. That our response, our first response as we read Scripture and as we learn from it, should be worship. If that was what David was like, Christ is even more wonderful.